Hello everyone. Today we're going to compare the Fujifilm X-T5 against the Nikon ZF. I'm going to tell you everything I like with the X-T5, and I'm going to tell you everything I dislike with the X-T5, and then I'm going to tell you how it stacks up against the ZF and everything I like and dislike with the ZF. And in the end, I'm going to tell you which one that I intend to keep. But there is a hint in the video that could reveal it. And I'm also going to give out some points for the winner of each category, just for fun. Now, let's get started. Let's start with the Fujifilm XT5. First off, the custom modes that this camera provides is really good. There's 7 custom modes in stills and 7 custom modes in film. In each custom modes, you could save a wide variety of settings. For example, in stills, you could custom tunes and save the famous Fujifilm recipes. While in video, you could, for example, save different white balances, frame rates, and so on, which makes this a really versatile and effective camera to work with. Now, on the ZF, there's no custom modes at all. What you have is what you get. No more, no less. So, 1 point for the Fuji. Now, let's talk about colors. The Fujifilm is the winner for me. And I'm not talking about recipes and costume settings. I'm talking about the RAW file and how the RAW file looks when you open it up in your RAW editor. The RAW file looks much better on a Fujifilm camera. It's warmer and nicer, while the ZF is colder, and I feel like the X-T5 and the Fuji RAW file is more custom to the real life as I experience it. Well, we're not talking about dynamic range and technicalities. We're simply talking about the colors. Next one has to do with the build quality. This might be controversial because the build quality on the ZF is pretty good, but I would say that it's slightly better on the Fujifilm, even if the dials are not made of brass and they are not so clicky. Hear me out. This is fully metal built. The top is metal and the bottom is metal. And it feels solid. It's completely weather sealed and it's really good. Now, the ZF, well, the same could be said. But the bottom plate is made of plastic. Come on, Nikon. You create an amazing camera, where those who buy the camera buys it for the look and the feel, and you freaking cheap out by putting some cheap plastic that scratch easy on the bottom. Shame on you. Because of that, I'm going to give 1 point to the Fuji. Now, let's talk about the exposure compensation. Both of them have the dial that you can reach with your thumb. They feel a little bit different. It's more tactile on the Nikon, but what makes it better on the Fuji is what you see in the viewfinder and on the LCD. It's more visible where your exposure compensation is set at on the Fuji. I often have to take away the camera from my eye in order to understand where the exposure compensation is at on the Nikon. Because of that, I'm going to give 1 point to the Fuji. Let's move onwards to the ergonomic. Straight out of the box, the ergonomic on the Fujifilm is much better. Straight out of the box, the ergonomic on the Nikon is really, really bad. You always feel like you're going to drop this camera. It's a camera that you need 2 hands to operate and handle. You need to add at least a thumb grip to this camera in order for it to feel good. But I would recommend a half case. Because of that, 1 point to the Fuji. Now, let's talk about some things that I don't like with the Fujifilm camera. First off, you can't change focus modes during movie recording. For example, if you had a camera set to human face detection and you want to change that to animal detection mid-recording, you can't do that. You need to stop the recording, change the setting, and start the recording again. The same goes for the other focusing mode. For example, if you have a zone focus and you want to change to touch tracking, you need to stop the recording, change your setting, and then start the recording. Really, why? While on the Nikon, you could change mid-recording and you don't have to stop anything. It's simply much better. Because of that, I'm going to give -1 point to Fuji. Now, let's move onwards and talk about the autofocus on the Fuji. I feel like the hit rate on the Fuji is just okay. It's not great, but it's just okay. There's been a lot of discussions regarding the Fujifilm autofocus, and this is not one of those discussions. I'm just simply comparing it to the Nikon, and the Nikon is better. Therefore, I'm going to take away 1 point from the Fuji, and I'm going to give 1 point to the Nikon. Now, the dials on the Fuji, they are a little bit plasticky. They're not made of brass, but they feel good. They're not so tactile, but they are more quiet. So in certain situations, if you appreciate the dials being quiet, they are better. But if you appreciate the tactile experience, well, then the Nikon dials are better. Because there's benefit with the dials on the Fuji and there's benefits with the dials on the Nikon, I'm going to give 1 point to each. Let's move on to the Nikon ZF and talk about the things that I like with this camera. First off, the camera body itself. It looks freaking good. And because of that, I'm going to give 1 point to the Nikon. Let's move on to the dials. They are tactile and they feel good. They are made of brass and they will wear down and they will look nice. Because of that, I'm going to give 1 point to Nikon. Moving on, I'm going to talk about the autofocus, especially the autofocus in stills mode. The autofocus in stills mode are simply better. But one thing that I really appreciate is the 3D tracking. The Fuji has tracking as well, and it works in a similar way. Now, the 3D tracking on Nikon is a little bit box that when you half press the trigger, that box starts to track the subject that was within it. It could be a lamppost, it could be a person, it could be anything, and it works really good. Therefore, I'm going to give 1 point to Nikon. Let's move onwards. You could change the focus mode during recording on this camera. Therefore, I'm also going to give 1 point to the Nikon. The Nikon, because the total lack of ergonomic and lack of grip, works really well with the half case. So, if half case is something that you like or want in order to protect your camera, the Nikon is a good option. Not only does it look good, it adds extra grip, which is really needed on this camera. Because I liked the look of it and I also like to protect my camera, therefore I'm going to give 1 point to the Nikon because it feels good with the half case, while the Fujifilm is better without. Let's talk about manual lenses. Manual lenses on a Nikon is amazing. Not only does it have the best manual focusing assist tools on the market, it can also autofocus manual lenses. Yes, you heard that right. This camera can autofocus manual Leica M lenses. But you need an adapter. You need a TechArt TCM adapter. What this adapter does is that it moves the lens forward and backwards, and because of that, it's able to acquire focus. And the nice thing with the M-mount system is that almost every other lens can be adapted to M-mount, which means that this camera can autofocus almost any vintage lens that you could find on the flea market. While manual lenses on the X-T5 is horrible. The focus peaking stays on all the time. On previous models, when you had, for example, the red focus peaking and hard press the trigger, the focus peaking went away and you could see a clean image of what you were about to photograph. Now, on these newer models, the focus peaking remains and clutter the viewfinder with like red things all over the place, and the experience is really, really bad. Because of that, I'm going to take away 1 point for the Fuji, and I'm going to give the Nikon 2 points, because not only is it better with manual lenses, it can also autofocus the manual lenses. Now, let's talk about the auto ISO on the Nikon ZF. It's brilliant. It works really, really good. You have to go into the menu and activate it. How this works is that the dial becomes the limit for your maximum auto ISO level. Set the dial to 800 and the camera is never going to go above ISO 800. Set the dial to 25,600 and the camera is going to be able to go all the way up to 25,600 but never above. So now you have a physical dial to limit your auto ISO. It's brilliant. I don't know why Fujifilm isn't implementing something like this. Because of that, I'm going to give 1 point to the Nikon. Let's talk about the things that I don't like with the Nikon camera. For some reason, Nikon decided that they're going to create a camera inspired by the older cameras that they made in the past. They decided that we're going to make this in brass, we're going to make it solid, it's going to be weather sealed just as our flagships. But hey, let's cheap out and make this whole piece in the bottom in really cheap plastic that scratch really easy. It's a shame. Shame on you, Nikon. Let's move onward and talk about the rubber ports. Nikon have a history of just creating bad ports. What happens with these ports over time is that they lose their shape. They're starting to bulk, and I think this compromises the weather sealing. This camera is not old, and it's already starting to change. And when I'm pressing it, there's a play in it. It's really, really bad. Now let's compare it to the Fuji, where you have like textured doors that opens nicely, that closes nicely, and when you close it, there's a click, and you can feel confident that these doors are going to keep out water when you're using this camera in bad weather. Because of this, I'm going to give 1 point to the Fuji, and I'm going to take away 1 point for the Nikon. Let's talk about the hinge here. The hinge itself is solid, but the parts around it is made of plastic and there's a play in it. It shouldn't be like that on a camera like this. On the other hand, on the Fujifilm, you have a different screen altogether, but when you are completely out, there's a play in it. Because there's issues with both screens, there's no points giving here. The autofocus on this camera in stills are really, really good, but the autofocus in film, especially when it comes to touch tracking, is not good. In stills, you have the 3D tracking, and the 3D tracking doesn't moves over to film. Instead, you have a quite unreliable tracking, and the point tracking, if you want to track a certain subject that you touch using the touch screen, it's not reliable and it doesn't work. Therefore, -1 point to Nikon. Moving on, there's no custom modes in the Nikon. This is really weird. It's a weird choice. Yeah, it's a weird choice. That's all we have to say. I thought, though, that I can live with it. I can live with it. I just using the custom functions on buttons and customize the buttons so the things I want to change are easy to access. But no, Nikon made sure you can't do that, because for some reason, if you want to add certain functions on this button, there's a list with available functions, and those functions are different for each customizable button. So you can have certain things on this button, and then you feel like, okay, let's have other things on this button that were available on this button, but those things are not available on that top button. It's really weird. While on the Fuji, you have a list of customizable functions that you could assign to every button, and they are all the same. But not on this. It's really weird. What that means in practice is that there's certain buttons that I never really use. And those buttons would be used for custom functions. Instead, I have a shortcut to my menu where I could access certain things that I need quick access to. Things that I would much rather have on a button, things that I have on buttons on the Fujifilm. Because of that, I'm going to take away 1 point for the Nikon. And the last thing that I don't like with this camera is that it feels big and it feels heavy. That's also kind of like a good thing, but we're comparing it to the Fuji. While the Fuji is something that would work great as an everyday carry, doing the same with the Nikon requires some dedication. And I think dedication is the key word when we're talking about the Nikon. You need to dedicate yourself to this camera, to use this camera, and to enjoy this camera. Now, let's sum it up. If I were just to keep one of these cameras out of what I'm doing, I would keep the Nikon camera. I'm using these cameras mostly for stills, and this being a full-frame camera that works really, really good with vintage lenses that can be used with autofocus. Full frame is required for me in that situation because those vintage lenses have so much character towards the edges of the lens, and I want that full field of view that the lens was designed for. But if I were just to have one camera, and that camera should be able to do a little bit of everything. It should be a camera that I could bring with me to travel. It's a camera that I should be able to make amazing stills with. I want to shoot video and I want to use it as a hybrid camera. Well, then the Fuji camera is a much better choice. There's no doubt about it. Those custom settings that you have 7 of is a really good thing to have. It makes the camera versatile and effective. So if you are into the market to buy either of this camera and you're thinking of which one you should buy, well, then you need to ask yourself, what are your main purpose with the camera? Are you going to have a camera that you're planning to bring with you a lot and you want a smaller size, you want to shoot video and really use all those settings? Well, then you have to get this one. While if that's not your melody, if you just want a nice camera that is a nice piece of kit, well, then the ZF is definitely the choice. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day.